Hey everyone, Tactics here. In this video, I'll be giving you the rundown on the first 3 bosses in Liberation of Undermine on Mythic difficulty here, going over the changes to the fight coming from normal and heroic, as well as how those changes impact the strategy for the fight, and then just other tips and tricks to help you and your group get them down. I am going to be assuming that you are familiar with the normal and heroic abilities of these fights just to save on explanation time. So if you aren't, you can check out my full normal and heroic guide video, which I'll link down below. Otherwise, let's get into the first boss, Vexie and the Geargrinders. So in terms of changes on this fight, it has to do with the motorbikes, and it also has to do with a new ad spawning during the intermission. So we'll get to those in a second. Starting though, let's talk about positioning. Very similar to heroic. You see, we start in the middle of the room here. We're going to drop the first tank puddle right here in the middle. Tank buzzer goes out, boom, puddle in the middle, and then we're going to move towards one edge of the room, putting these first oil puddles on the markers here, again, kind of in the middle of the room on either side of the tank soak, to basically make this wall of oil in the middle of the room. And then we move to this side to bait all the bikes on the far side and force them to charge through this wall, stunning them. So that's the reasoning for this positioning. From here on out, again, just like heroic, all oil puddles can go off towards the side. And again, the tank puddle, we're going to kind of bounce back and forth between the middle of the room and the wall to drop puddles here, and we'll clear those puddles with fire. And again, all the puddles move to the side, also clear that with fire. Ads are coming out here, and we're going to get to the mythic mechanic here in just a second. So basically, when these bikes come out, when they die, they're going to shoot out 2 soaks, and these soaks, the people that catch them, are going to get this oil debuff on them. So basically, you need to refill the bikes with oil in order to actually shoot them. Here are the soaks here, and you can see these bikes are now at 0 out of 2. You need to bring 2 oils to the bikes to actually be able to shoot them. So if you miss these soaks, you need to kill more bikes in order to get more oil to actually fill them up. So that the soaks become very, very important. The other thing, when you do soak, you will get a debuff that makes you take drastically increased damage from soaking. So that basically means that if you're not a tank player, you don't really want to be taking more than 1 soak debuff. You want to wait for your debuff to fall off before soak again. So you can see here again, you can see who got the soaks here, and you can see the bikes are getting filled up. And then once they're full, they can be charged. You can see here they're finally full, being charged. Debuffs, just want to get this out away from the bikes. You can see sometimes you're going to miss debuffs. We did not fill this 3rd bike fully. We missed 1 soak. So what does that mean? That means we're going to have to kill an additional bike beyond the 6 that we need to actually break the shield off the boss. So that is a thing here on Mythic. You may need to kill more bikes than required in order to get enough oil. One thing to note about the oil, when you get it, it will deposit onto the first bike you run towards. So, for example, if you're killing an extra bike, if you're killing a 7th bike to fill a 1 out of 2 bike over here, if you run past that bike that you killed, you're going to fill that bike instead. So be careful here in terms of when you're filling bikes, which bikes you're filling. It can be a little hard if the bikes are stacked up, so just be aware of that. But that's basically it. So that's the mythic mechanic. Otherwise, phase 1 is entirely the same in terms of timings, in terms of the fire. You have to use the fire to clear that puddle that we just made nearby. Use it to clear some of the other nearby puddles. Killing these bikes, probably see me get a soak soon, potentially, so I can actually see how it works. Getting the soaks, see they're all taken already. Get into this. I do get an oil here, so you can see this is the oil buff. 30 seconds, run in the nearest spike, deposit it. Still have a 1-minute CDR or timer on the soak, but as a tank, you can take more. And here's the 3rd set of bikes. And again, we're going to have to kill a set of bikes from here because we did not get all the oil we needed. So we need 1 more set of oil from these bikes to actually push the phase here. And again, you're still on a timer because that energy is still ticking up. So you still need to do this relatively quickly. So we're getting these last oils in to soak our bikes, and we're pushing our boss damaging up phase. And you're going to notice the timer here, it's just under 2 minutes when you're going to be pushing this phase. Again, if you were a little bit faster, you can do this a little bit quicker, but I still actually recommend pushing it around the time we're about to, because what that allows you to do is it puts 2 minutes on pull, and then you have 2 minutes with the burn phase here with bloodlust and your potions, and then from then on, you just always have your 2 minutes with the burn phases. So I recommend pushing around this timer anyways. There's our last bike going in here in a second. Boom. And then here's the lust, here's the burn phase. This bike's just going to go away, it's whatever. And now is where we get to the second mythic mechanic, which are the new ads coming up here. So you're going to see in just a second here. You can kind of see the edge of this circle here, but basically there's a new type of ads that spawn in this phase that will make any pit mechanics or other ads near them CC immune. There's another close one, easier to see there. So basically, what the goal is to just CC these ads specifically away from the boss, because while it makes the pit mechanics immune to CCs and interrupts, it does not make the ads themselves immune to them. So having things like paralysis, probably freezing trap on these far ones, entangling roots, mass entangle, those are really, really nice CCs that you can immediately send out on these ads to lock them down away from the boss, so that you can still keep interrupts and CCs on the pit mechanics here and grips and all that stuff, right? Solar beams, all that stuff, Hodges, right? And that mobs just CC'd away from us. We're not worried about it at all. It's not going to be a problem. So you just need enough CCs in your group. And we have 2 druids and 2 monks here, which do a lot of the heavy lifting with roots and paralysis. And then we also have the 2 hunters who can try and get, additional traps and stuff like that, in case anything is loose. But mostly it's the entangling roots and the paralysis that are used to do that. And from here it just repeats. So it's just the same thing over and over again. Pull the boss away, drop the oil away, and we still have that wall out here. It may despawn at some point, so just need to keep an eye out on that. But for the most part, just the same thing. Keep the oil away from where you're going to play. Bait all the bikes there, leave them down, soak the oil, deposit it, shoot the bikes in, and that is this fight on Mythic. Let's move on here to Cauldron of Carnage, where I am not going to use my POV because it's a little hard to see. I'm going to be using Bansher's POV, which is a hunter in my guild. You guys can check him out. I'll link his Twitch and his YouTube down below. So check him out. He puts all his VODs on YouTube, and he also streams on both Twitch and YouTube. Does a bunch of high keys and stuff. So be sure to check him out for sure. And his POV is quite useful because he is the one doing the mythic mechanic on this boss fight. So for here, both bosses have one altered ability on Mythic, but also there's a new mechanic in these toys that spawn that basically you need to have players on each side kick towards the middle to have them collide. This applies a raid dot to you, and you need to complete that, do all the toys before the clash in the middle. Otherwise, you wipe. The toys do a billion bonus damage. So he's going to be in charge of doing toys on one side, and we have another hunter, I believe, in charge of doing toys on the other side. But really, it's just having a mobile ranged player ideally doing this is very, very useful, and just one on each side. And you can have additional people helping out depending on where the toys spawn, but generally one player on each side being in charge of this is how you want to do it. So starting here on the gorilla side, you're going to see the toys pretty quickly. In terms of the change for the gorilla side, it has to do with the ads. Basically, now on heroic, the ads, they would only spawn a puddle on the ground if they came into contact with a player. On Mythic, they will always drop a puddle on the ground after they expire. So the goal here is basically to make sure that you only use like CCs and roots on these mobs when they're towards the edge, which we do a poor job of here, by the way. And you generally, if you're targeted by these and they're in the middle of the room, you want to kite them to the edge before you actually do anything to them. So that is the main thing. Have good space management. It's really great if you see these if they're already on top of an existing puddle, or if they're towards the edge of the room and just away. Now he's going to go start managing these toys. So you can see here, there's these toys in the middle of the room. Tiny Torque. He's going to go grab that in just a second here. And he's going to kick that into the other side in just a second. And here's the ad spawn. Like I'm saying, he sees the Florender here. Boom, boom, kicks the toys in. And they're going to get close enough. They're going to run into each other. And they're going to apply a dot to the group here. So that's how these toys function. I believe I want to say there's like 3 toys initially on each side. I believe is the correct number, 3 toys. Probably get a better view of it on the other side. I think the other person detonated the first 2 on this, so Bangers only had to deal with the third toy, which you saw there. But again, just having kind of one player on each side managing the 2 is really going to be the best in terms of dealing with that. Now in terms of the ad position, you can see like we kind of have a mediocre puddle here. We have a really good puddle over there. Having good space management on this fight is very, very important on both sides, because you kind of have a lot of phases. Now we're going to go clash across our sides here, fast forward a little bit through this clash. And then we're going to go to the fire side here, where you see we started out, again, similar to the heroic strat, where the dino started up here and the gorilla was kind of down towards the other side. We're going to pull the dino to where we have markers here on the other wall, the gorilla is going to go up towards the opposite wall diagonally, and we're baiting the bombs here. Bomb bait here. Additional thing we've changed about this strat, by the way, is that when this bomb goes out, we've changed it so that the person who's dealing with the toys doesn't soak the bomb. It's much easier. You just 9-man soak this bomb, and in this case, Bangerz could go and he could start managing these toys. Gives him a lot more time to manage these toys. We don't do that on this kill, but that is my recommended thing now. Just whoever you have on the red side managing the toys, don't have them be in the bomb soak. They still need to come over here and bait the bomb, the initial bomb spawn, but after that, they're free to leave during all this stuff happening, and it's just much easier. You can also see the mythic change on this boss here is the frontal. It has like 3 big lines, so it covers up way more area on mythic than heroic, but you still handle this the exact same way. Point this off the edge of the room, and don't point this towards the gorilla, just so they never need to deal with it. Everyone's soaking the bomb here too. You can see we're clustered on the right side of the bomb. This does overlap. If you knocked yourself forward here, you would go into this beam and die. So make sure you get knocked away from the beam, not into the beam. That would be very, very bad. You can see him managing the toys here a little bit here. Now, boom, knocks it in, gets them detonated together. Comes back to bait the bomb. And again, just repeats from here. This is all basically heroic at this point. Put the beam to the side. Get out of the beam. Get knocked away from the beam. This is just heroic from here, right? So it's outside of the toy management, which is not super difficult, as you've seen. Like, he just kind of sometimes runs out, knocks a toy. Sometimes other people, if they're near a toy, get it. Sometimes the other side gets the toys. As long as you're not stacking up the toys, because this is a dot on the raid, you don't want to do like a triple stack of the toys, but having a stack here, or even sometimes a double stack, is not a big deal. Just ideally, you don't want to overlap the double stack with the bomb going off, because that's the other major form of damage. So as long as that's not happening at the same time, it's kind of fine. And then the big thing is just space management. Like I said, you got to go in, fill in clear spots. You can see here, we go on the gorilla side. Our space management is horrendous. This is a terrible one. This is a terrible one. These are nice here, but it's just like, it's not great. So again, trying to CC these things where they're towards the edge or on an existing puddle is highly recommended. Do that. Don't be like us. Don't be like us. Oh no, is he dead here? Surely he gets res. There we go. Looking back fireside, you can see again, our space management, kind of bad. Our first sets should have been closer here. Should have left this whole space open. This one's kind of bad. This one's kind of bad. So make sure you are baiting on both sides properly. Bait your bombs properly. Bait your kite your ads properly on the gorilla side, and it just makes these later phases so much easier. But again, otherwise, this is just kind of heroic. So that's his boss. So again, have an easier time with better baits, but otherwise, it's not too bad. You can work around it. You just need to work a little bit harder. That brings us to the hardest of the first 3 bosses, Rik Reverb, who's also already seen a nerf here. Week 2 got a pretty hefty health nerf, as well as a pretty healthy nerf to the health of the ads, kind of opening up a second strategy. So there's really 2 main strategies for this boss now. There's our strategy, which can be done with 2 tanks and 4 healers. And then there's a new strategy with soaking using a 3rd tank. But for that to meet the damage check, you likely want to still run 3 healers. This one was 2 tank, 3 healer because it was week 1 before the nerf. But after the nerf, we've been 4 healing it now. So it kind of depends on what you want to do. The 3 tank strategy simplifies the draining a bit. But obviously, again, you're using 3 healers. The 4 heal strategy, you have to have a little bit of setup with the draining, but it's not too complicated in my opinion. And obviously you have that 4th healer to alleviate some of the stress happening in that fight. So whichever one works for your group, I'll go over both of them a little bit here. Starting with our strategy, the 2 tank 4 heal, both of them actually use the same positioning. So these markers here, we're always going to start every phase on Moon. That's always where we're going to be starting them. So we're going to pull over to Moon. Fast forward here, sorry, to the actual start of the pull. And then basically what happens here is range bait the amps along these markers on the off in the middle of the room, and melee put the boss amps along the wall of the room here. And having the boss near the wall tends to, it seems to, cluster the ads a little bit more to make them easier to kind of cleave down. So that's kind of the logic behind that. So we always start at Moon because there's no ads off the top. So you put that first one at Moon. Every single phase, the start of every phase, we always come back to Moon as well. drop that first amp. It's also a solo amp as well, so the range could kind of chill at diamond for the whole first part of this fight. Then we drag to X for the second one. And this is also where we're going to get our first ad spawns. You can see it's kind of a little bit clustered. And where we can, we will drag the boss on top of these guys if possible. We're in Lust and CDs here, so we actually don't do this initially. We also had a decent grouping there, so it wasn't a big deal. And basically, it's always ranged job to get the ad that is far. Because usually you get one far ad. Sometimes you get two. So whenever that happens, range immediately prioritizes that ad. This is a range responsibility. And occasionally we'll call them, hey, melee, come help us with this. Because we're not getting in time, especially if there's two really far ads that happens. But when it's only one like this, range pretty much entirely handle that on their own. In terms of Mythic mechanics now, the big thing is this shield on the amp here. That is one. So basically, you need to actually have people with the electric debuff that comes out, the zaps. They need to collide on top of this amp to actually cleanse it. So you can see two people get it. You need to touch each other. Boom. Shield is gone. Now this amp can be drained. So that is Mythic mechanic number one. This also deals a hit of raid damage as well when you do it. So just be aware of that. So that's part of that. In terms of other Mythic mechanics, we've got the actual soak coming out, actually. So that's going to be the line. The random target line attack here that comes out. He's going to go soak that. We'll talk about the actual soak strategy later on. The random target line here, it's going to come out in just a second. This is actually a group soak, the sound cannon. So what happens here is whoever gets targeted, they point this at the range tag. And you can see the range tag dropped a diamond. They move to the next one. Just as melee dropped at X, move to the next one. This is always pointed at the range camp. And everyone gets in this besides obviously the active tank. The active tank, point in the front away from the group. Don't do that. But this is now a group soak. And if you ever get pushed below 75% health, I believe, by this hit, you are mind controlled and you need to break that mind control out. So want as many people in this as possible. Beware, things that can push you below 75% aren't necessarily the sound cannon itself. Sometimes the fire circles from the ads spawn in this line. That can hit you low, and then the sound cannon push you below 75%. Mind control. The other thing is these circles. They're bouncing around the room at the same time as well. This can hit you, drop your health a bit, and then you get hit by this beam and you get pushed below 75%. You get mind controlled. So be careful of those things. The final Mythic mechanic has to do with these circles. You get a debuff when you get hit by these circles, right? And a new Mythic mechanic is if you get a debuff again, well, you have the debuff, so you get hit by a second circle before that debuff expires. I believe it's like 6 seconds or something like that. If you get a second debuff, you also are mind controlled. So you need to make sure you are avoiding these circles. Very, very easy to get mind controlled here. If anyone ever does get mind controlled, you just need to damage them quickly, especially if it's a tank. Hard swap to them to break the mind control so that they can get back to doing whatever they're doing. So those are the Mythic mechanics. Now, how do we handle soaking of these amplifiers? Our strategy, the 2 tank, 4 healer strategy, how we do it is you will break the amplifier here, and then the people that break this amplifier go to soak it. So whoever broke it, whether that's a ranged melee, whoever, they are going to go soak that amplifier. Same thing, when you break these ones, you're going to see here, whoever gets these next zaps, they're going to go break these amplifiers. And have a melee go to the X as well as the range, and they're going to soak their amplifier. You can see they're both the melee and the range are helping to soak. Both the range are helping to soak. They soak this amplifier to 0, and at the same time, we have an assigned player go out and soak the first amplifier down to 0 as well. So at this point, all 3 of these amplifiers are at 0. From here, you are never soaking another amp. None of these amps get soaked. The 2 amps that come at the end of the phase do not get soaked. And then when we actually hit the intermission, they're all going to get eliminated, and you're not going to need to worry about too much of the damage. You take a bit of damage at the start of the intermission, which you need to be aware of, but you have 4 healers, so you're not super worried about that. You can just heal through that. And then it gets cleared by the intermission itself. So that is the soak strategy with 4 healers. So it requires some setup. You need a set player, a pair, to manage this amplifier outside of the initial soak, but otherwise it's just whoever breaks this soaks it, whoever breaks this soaks it, whoever breaks this soaks it, and then whoever breaks the last 2, you still need to break them, of course. You don't want the shield to persist. They do not soak it. So these last amplifiers are coming out. We're moving again. This is where we kind of have the weird cleaving situation. Killing these. We're still going to have these next zaps actually clear these, but you're going to see these zaps are not going to actually soak them. They're going to zap it. They're going to walk away from them. They're going to leave them. We're going to kill these last adds. And then boss positioning here, we're going to go into the intermission very, very soon. Starting to pull the boss a little bit away to give us some more space to deal with these. The intermission is starting. Melee is running away from the boss, and you get one of these back amplifiers first. It's always going to be one of these back 3 amplifiers first, by the way, always. And it's going to be them back to back to back here. And then you'll get one of the close ones. So you need to be ready to move to one of these close ones as well. And it's pretty straightforward. Again, you take a bit of damage at the start of this intermission if you're watching the health frames because these amps are getting high. But then later on, it's pretty fine. And then here, we're just going to run back to the moon marker, like I said, from the start. And now we have the 1 leftover amp. And again, this is where you start to have assignments. There's going to be a total of 2 leftover amps. 1 after first intermission, 1 after second intermission. And once again, we have an assigned pair of ranged players to deal with each of them, where it works in a pretty similar fashion to how I mentioned before, where, you know, you're going to have them alternating soaking this just to make sure it's down to do low energy and it never overlaps for the rest of the fight, because the debuff, similar to heroic, lasts a pretty long time, like 45 seconds or something like that. So you need to alternate who is soaking to keep these amps down. You can see there's one of the assigned people soaking it now. These soaks deal quite a bit of damage once you start getting to above like 6-7 stacks. So you're going to see them pop defensives there. I think he popped a fuse magic there when he started to get to 5 stacks just to last for the remainder of his soaking. And then someone else is going to come in and soak that. Potentially he'll come in and do it a third time. But basically, from here on out, you have pairs assigned to the remaining amplifiers. Now, for the 3-tank strategy, same movement, same everything. You're going to have people assigned to breaking this. Boom, they're going to break that. They're going to break these shields, of course, in the exact same way. But differently is a lot of the time, the soaking is going to be handled by that 3rd tank because they're not really in as much danger going up to 6 stacks plus as a regular player. They can go up 10 plus stacks relatively safely. Plus, they've got defensives. In terms of what tanks are better for this, it's usually something like a bear is probably pretty good at it. Paladin is really, really good at it as well. Then a warrior probably be pretty good at it as well. I'm not sure about brewmaster. I definitely think you'd want to avoid having a blood decay or a vengeance team how to do it. You just want a tank that has a lot of DR options available. I think paladin's probably the best option, but again, the bear and the warrior are also probably solid as well as a 3rd tank option. And what this strategy basically does is it concentrates a lot of that potential extra raid damage from soaking into that 1 tank player. Instead of having other players need to use defensives to soak it, just the tank does it. And that kind of alleviates some of the healing requirement on this fight because, you know, random people aren't taking damage. Random people can commit their defensives to other things instead of soaking. And so that's kind of why you still keep with the 3 healers to still maintain enough damage to actually beat the damage check on this boss fight, which is still, you know, relatively tight. Once you get a couple more weeks of gear, it'll be a lot easier. But, you know, at least at the moment, it's a little tight. So something to keep in mind there. Also, with the 3-tank strategy, the 3rd tank can't handle everything on their own. They still will need some pitching in, especially again on these pylons that end up remaining over the course of the fight in intermission. So you still may need to assign a pair to handle that and just have your tank player deal with the 3 new ones every phase. Potentially a little bit easier in terms of setup, but I think either works. I think either is totally fine. It just kind of depends on what you have access to. If you have access to a 3rd tank, you can try that. If you just want a 4 heal and you don't want to deal with the 3rd tank stuff, I actually think assigning the soaking in the way we did it is actually not very complicated. Either works, tanks or soakers, whatever you want to do. And then in the 3-tank strategy as well, you just have the 2 tanks just constantly doing the same thing that they would normally do. And sometimes you can even have a tank on the boss. If they swap, you can have that tank that just swapped run out and do a soak as well. That can also be very useful in both strategies. But there we have it, guys. That is the first 3 bosses on Mythic Liberation of Undermine. Hopefully this helps you out, and if it does, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like it, including individual boss guides for all of the remaining Mythic bosses in this raid, as well as advanced dungeon guides going over more complicated routes for players looking to push for the 0.1% Mythic Plus title, plus a lot more. As always, I need to give a shout out to all of my amazing supporters over on Patreon for making content like this possible. So thank you, and I'll see everyone in the next video.